Welcome to lesson 4 of beginner crochet. In this lesson, we'll be covering the half treble crochet stitch in the UK or half double crochet in the US. It's the same stitch, but the UK and the US have different terminology. Turning chains can be made with 1 or 2 chains, so I'll show you both methods. I've already made 10 chains. Now I'll make 2 more for the height of the stitch. We start in the 3rd chain from the hook. Yarn over and push your hook into the chain. Yarn over and pull your hook back through the chain. There are 3 loops on the hook. Make sure the loops are even. Yarn over, pull through all 3 loops, leaving 1 loop on the hook. Yarn over and push your hook into the next chain. Yarn over and bring your hook back through. Yarn over and bring the hook back through all 3 loops. Yarn over and push your hook into the next chain. Yarn over and bring your hook back through. Yarn over and bring the hook back through all 3 loops. So long as you remember to yarn over before going in the chain and pull through all 3 loops together, you won't go wrong. Use the middle finger of your hook hand on the loops to help position them. We now have 5 stitches. Remember, if you make a mistake, just remove your hook and pull on the yarn to undo the stitches you're unhappy with. As you work, remember to have slack coming from the ball and that your loops are even before closing the stitch. Now for the 10th stitch in the last chain. So the first row is finished. So we have 10 stitches, not including the chain 2. Chain 2 and turn your work. We skip the first stitch and work into the second. Yarn over and make the first stitch. Continue making half trebles in each stitch along the row. I'll speed up to the last stitch. The last stitch is made in the turning chain. It can be a bit tight to get the hook in sometimes. Row 2 is finished. We have 10 stitches, not including the turning chain. The following rows are made exactly the same as row 2. Just remember to start in the second stitch and end in the turning chain. Sometimes, the first stitch is worked into instead of being skipped. It all depends on the pattern and personal preference. If this is the case, then the last stitch isn't worked into the chain. We have 10 stitches, not including the turning chain. So I've got 9 chains. I'll chain 2 for the stitch height. These will also be our first stitch. Once again, we start in the 3rd chain from the hook. That's our second stitch. Carry on making half trebles into each chain. We have 10 stitches again, this time including the turning chain. Chain 2 and turn. We'll still start in the second stitch and work along the row. I'll speed up again. Let's have a quick stitch count. The turning chain is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, the 9th stitch is worked here, and the 10th in the chain. Wiggle your hook a little if it's tight. Including the chain, we have 10 stitches. The following rows are made the same as this row. So I've got 10 chains plus 1 for turning. This time we'll start in the second chain from the hook. Oops! Almost forgot to yarn over first. The actual stitch is exactly the same. The differences between the two methods are where the first and last stitches are placed, and whether the turning chain is counted as a stitch. As the stitches are made the same as the first method, I'll skip to the end. I'll have a quick stitch count. Chain 1. And turn the work. Now we work into the first stitch instead of the second. Yarn over. Insert your hook. We have our V's and loops. Yarn over. Pull back through. Yarn over. And close the stitch. Our first stitch is made. I'll skip to the end. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 and 10. This time I won't include the chain in my stitch count. Chain 1, turn your work, and start in the first stitch again. I'll jump to the end again. The last stitch can look a little funny. The top of the stitch is here. I'll show you the two techniques side by side so you can see the difference. So to recap, if you are not counting the turning chain of 2, you will need to make a chain for each stitch, plus an extra 2, i.e., for 10 stitches, you would need a total of 12 chains. From row 2 onwards, you start in the second stitch and finish in the turning chain. The second option of not counting the chain 2 has the same chain count, but row 2 starts in the first stitch and ends in the last stitch. The third option counts the chain 2. With this option, for 10 stitches you would need 11 chains. Start in the second stitch and finish in the turning chain. These three options all start row 1 in the third chain. The last option has a turning chain of 1. Again, for 10 stitches you would need 11 chains, but row 1 starts in the second chain. Row 2 starts in the first stitch and ends in the last. They all produce slightly different results. I prefer chaining 2 and working in the first stitch. Which do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. I've gone over the basics of what a pattern contains in lesson 2, so we'll just look at the front page for the relevant information. We'll be making 2 swatches. The first will have a turning chain of 1 and the second a turning chain of 2. The pattern calls for a 4mm hook and uses about 6 grams acrylic double knit yarn. Both swatches have 14 stitches and 14 rows and are around 4.5 inches in height and 3.25 in width. The chain 2 swatch is a touch taller because of the extra chain, but the gauge for both is 3 rows by 4 stitches per inch. Here is the chart symbol, stitch name and abbreviation in both terms. Let's start with the chain 1 swatch. All the instructions state chain 15 and make a HTR in the second chain from the hook. Remember, the loop on the hook isn't counted. This tells us that there is a turning chain of 1 and there should be 14 stitches. Okay, so let's start crocheting. First make the 15 chains. Keep hold of your chains under the hook and keep an eye on your slack coming from the ball of yarn. So that's 14 chains and now 1 for turning. we skip the first chain and work into the second. That's our first stitch. Now just carry on making 13 stitches along the chain. You can count the stitches as you go, or at the end. I'll leave you to finish row 1, and I'll be back for row 2. Row 1 is finished. Remember to count your stitches if you didn't already. Let's do row 2. Chain 1 and turn. Work into the first stitch and carry on along the row, making a HTR in each stitch. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I reckon you got this, so I'll jump to the last stitch. Make sure you go under the V of the stitch and not the crossbar of the stitch below. Okay, that's the end of row 2. I'll leave you to finish the rest of the swatch. For rows 3 to 10, simply repeat row 2. If you're following the chart, remember to keep alternating the direction as you move up the rows. You can pause the video to keep the instructions up on screen, then continue to the second swatch. These instructions say to chain 15 and work in the third chain from the hook. I've already made 13 chains, so now it's 2 chains for the first stitch, which makes a total of 15. We're going into the third chain, here. Now we make 12 HTR into the chain. I'll fast forward this part as it's the same as the first swatch. Row 1 is finished. Remember to count your stitches if you didn't already. So for row 2, we chain 2 and turn. The chain is the first stitch this time. You can see it included in the stitch count on the chart. Make the first HTR in the second stitch, which gives us 2 stitches. Then continue making the remaining 12 stitches for a total of 14. I'll fast forward again to the end of the row. If you look at the chart, you can see the turning chain of 2, with a stitch above it. This shows the 14th stitch is worked into the turning chain. So that's row 2 finished. I'll leave you to finish the remaining rows. For rows 3 to 14, you just repeat row 2. Don't forget to work the chain at the end of each row. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in lesson 5 to learn the treble crochet stitch. I'll leave the pattern up here and a link below if you want a copy of it.